Welcome back to another photography shoot breakdown. This series, I rummage through my archive and I pull out an old assignment, commercial or editorial. I share my best, and what you guys seem to be more interested in is my worst shots. Yeah, I get raw, I get naked, not naked, but you know what I mean. I give you guys some tips and I give you a peek into the life of a working professional photographer. So for those of you that are new here, I'm Justin Mott, coming to you from my home here in Hanoi, Vietnam. My channel is dedicated to all things photography from the perspective of a seasoned pro, but my channel is open to pros, amateurs, anyone who just wants to learn. If you want to learn more about my online classes, workshop, and more, you can check out askmott.com. So for this story, we go back to 2010, a younger version of me. I was shooting with a Canon, I believe a Canon 5D Mark II and a bunch of Canon prime lenses. So the assignment took place here in Hanoi. That was great, just in my backyard. But back then I was working for them all around Southeast Asia, but it was nice to actually shoot in my home city. So the writer for this assignment was based in Bangkok. He was a staff writer. I was just a low-level freelancer, but we had done many assignments together. He became a bit like a mentor to me. He taught me a ton about what it takes to be a journalist for the New York Times, and he actually worked really well with photographers. His father was a famous photographer, so I believe that helped, but a lot of writers would always sort of treat you like an assistant or introduce you, so cringeworthy. They'd introduce you as like, this is Justin, my photographer. Seth was not one of those types of people. So Seth always had a knack for finding these little quirky human interest stories. And so this one was so interesting. It was the last blacksmith on Blacksmith Street. Hanoi has all these old school streets dedicated to specific trades, like Furniture Street, Bamboo Ladder Street, Cooking Oil Street, like Rice Street. You name it, they have it. Maybe now they'll have Content Creator Street. But modernization was sort of wiping these traditions out, and the street once famous for blacksmith was down to just one guy. Sure, there was other blacksmiths in the city, but Blacksmith Street, the area known for all these blacksmiths, was down to one. Shooting the last blacksmith, it was fun. It was a visually rich story. Trust me, I've had plenty of stories that I gotta make something out of nothing. So having a strong subject, a strong narrative, and a guy who was actually doing things rather than just sitting around, that's a great scenario for a photographer. So it was a one-day assignment. Typically, I'd work with Seth in different countries. Sometimes we'd go there for a big newsworthy assignment, like something happened. Like I remember when Suharto passed away. We flew there for that, but we did 5 other sub-stories. And then throughout the year, Seth would just go to these different countries in Southeast Asia because that was his region, and we just do a bunch of stories together. There might be 1 or 2 lead stories he had already planned, had in mind, and then when we hit the ground, he was open to finding stories. So here, there was no big news story in Vietnam at the time, but he was just here to do a bunch of little sub-stories, sort of an annual trip here. So for the one-day shooting, we arrived early in the morning. I think he started work around 7 a.m., he was at work. He gave me full access to everything. That's all I can ask for. I don't need him to do anything. We don't set things up, nothing like that. It's just, he's going to work, I'm going to document. But most of the time, people just expect you to be there for an hour or so. But I'm going to give an honest day's worth of work because I'm getting paid a full day rate. And in the end, my former professor's always in my head where he's like, hey, man, your name's on that caption. No matter what the assignment is or who it's for, your name's on that caption. You never know who's looking. So a full day, I know it's hard because it was just a tiny little corner shop. It was just a one-man operation. So Seth watched and took notes while I just sort of surveyed the scene. He was sort of getting ideas on what he wanted to ask, and since it was good light in the morning, he let me do my thing. And so that was a nice workflow. That's not always the case. Some writers just want to go in, get the story, and just have you take pictures while they interview the subjects, and those are always boring pictures. So Seth was nice, but he understood and he respected that, hey, the morning's going to be the best light, so he's just going to observe. He's going to get some questions banked and ready to go for his interview, and then we'll do the interview in bad light, and then I might shoot that, or I might just shoot some other details while he's doing that. So we always had a good plan. We always talked through the plan, and it was a very collaborative process. And like I said, that's not always the case. So every time he welded or worked with fire, I just, as a photographer, that stuff is fun. I just kind of went nuts, sparks flying, rough hands, smoke, charred tools. It was all so raw and textured, and that's where I focused. These are the kind of details that make a story like this pop visually. And typically, as I get an understanding of the tools, the fire, the space, then I'll look for the light. Then I'll look to craft images of all that stuff that I find visually interesting in that beautiful light and have it all come together. So I shot all morning. I took a lunch break, and then I came back in the afternoon to see if the vibe was different. So I spent the afternoon shooting him a little bit. Also scouted and photographed some other blacksmith locations in different areas just for extra coverage. But it's just to have extra coverage in case the writer talked about it's a dying area, but there are other parts. So I like to have myself covered. Basically, I don't want the writer or my photo editor coming back and saying oh, do you have any photos of this? and I don't have photos of this. So I'm always thinking about questions I'm going to ask, things I'm going to be looking for, and just covering myself. So as far as what worked well, I was happy with the close-up shots of his hands, the layering with the fire behind him, the dramatic lighting and beautiful light pockets for the detail shots, the action shots of him working, sparks flying, tools in motion, things like that. What I missed, now I can look back and be like, oh, I could have done that. I could have done that so much better. What I missed was a strong establishing shot. I tried, but I didn't quite nail it. My editor ended up using one of my weaker attempts, which stung because that's the part that my former teacher, his voice is in my head, where he's like, hey, no excuses in the caption. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And your name's on the caption, your name's on that picture. So, as an overall shot, I guess looking back, I probably could have gone back like a little bit later at night, but I think he stopped working right as night fell. So I don't know, or I could have just worked it better. I didn't really isolate his store well. It was a busy street, but like I said, again, no excuses in the caption. So I didn't get a shot that I knew would be important. I went to what was visually strong instead. I spent way more time on the hands, the fire, and the tools, and I should have spent a little bit more time on an overall shot. So looking back, like, that stuff kills me. I wouldn't do that anymore. But anyway, I was young back then. And it's just a good overall reminder. Remember what the story is about. Don't just follow what the pretty picture is. We're all guilty of it. I teach that in my workshops. Like, hey, that is a great photo, but that wasn't your assignment. Another regret was portraits. Back then, I was so focused on like pure documentary style, and I often skipped posed portraits unless I was specifically asked for that. I think that was a big mistake because I did get a couple portraits of him, but I think I could have done a much stronger portrait, and that can really elevate a story. And I bet you they would have used that. And looking at that scene now, I think of all sorts of different things I could do. The way he posed, the way he sat, fire in the background. The nice thing about a portrait is you can set everything up. You can pick the light, you can pick the posture, you can pick the composition, whereas all my other shots are just happening completely naturally, and I'm working around him. So, looking back, what I should have done, what I do now, I'll work a scene, I'll get to know a scene, I'll shoot all day, and I'll leave my portrait for the end of the day. I mean, of course, if good light pops up, then I'll shoot then. But if I spent time in an area, I know the scene well, I know the composition well, I know the subject well, so I'll end the day with hopefully a powerful portrait, and I didn't really do that. So in the end, the Times ran 2 of my images online. I can't remember how many they ran in print. They weren't my favorites, but I get why they ran these, and definitely my fault for not getting that establishing shot better. But that's just the reality of working with editors. I would have picked something more dramatic, but hey, they get the final say. And, sometimes an editor wants to work really closely with the story and what the writer mentioned, and sometimes they're open for it to be a little bit looser and a little more interpretive. But yeah, you just never know. But again, you take the images, you file the images, so you got to own them. So that's it for today's breakdown. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions in the comments section, let me know. If you want to improve your photography through one-on-one online classes, or if you're interested in my Vietnam workshop or private workshop anywhere in the world, I do customized workshops depending on your needs. Check all that out at askmott.com. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to have a wonderful day.